really we've leaned into data and AI. And the idea is that everyone's talking about how do we apply and incorporate AI to all of our companies. We've encouraged our teams to experiment as much as possible with AI, and particularly Claude and Claude Code. One of the things that we did, which I thought was pretty cool, is we looked at
Joining us today is Adam Stein, Managing Director of Talent at LeadEdge Capital, here to share how AI is changing the way he manages talent across 50 portfolio companies.
The whole world is talking about AI, and you're no exception. What about non-AI related things you're working on in the portfolio with people and talent and leadership?
I do a lot of work with our CEOs because everything comes back to the CEO. Different CEOs are going to have different demonstrated capabilities around managing at scale. How are the CEOs actually running their businesses? Meaning, we feel like there's a crystal clear understanding of where the business wants to go, what the strategy is to achieve those. It's not an easy thing to do. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. And so what we try to do is
Welcome to Human Capital Quantified. I am Dr. Sandy Fiaschetti with Lodestone People Consulting, and today I have Adam Stein with me. Adam is the Managing Director of Talent for LeadEdge Capital. So Adam, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Sandy. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Could you just start off? We're going to hit it. We're talking about all things human capital. Could you just start off by telling us a quick overview of your role, how you support the firm, kind of who you are and what you do?
Who I am and what I do. Okay. Seems to change every day. But generally speaking, I manage all of our talent for the portfolio. And so we've got about 50 portfolio companies. We're probably most focused on something like, 10 to 12 at a time. And so I got to LeadEdge Capital maybe about 3 years ago. And in those 3 years, we built out a platform, and that platform allows us to serve most every human capital need that our portfolio companies have. It spans, diligence and understanding, what the human capital current state might be for companies that we're, interested in before we do the deal. It's executive search and placement, it's leadership development and cohesion, it's HR operations, pretty much everything under the sun. While my role is not officially inward facing, I do end up helping our partners evolve the talent strategy within the company, especially given our new fund that we just raised and, the work that we've got ahead of us.
Yeah, awesome. So you said about 3 years ago you went in, and the role was new then, wasn't it?
Yeah, the role as it's scoped now was new for sure. Prior to my arrival, it was really more of a, search firm management function, but it was not a full platform.
Gotcha. So talk a little bit about how you spend your time. You said a little bit inward facing, but how are you split between dealing with the deal teams for diligence, working in value creation with the actual portfolio company teams? Just talk a little bit about, if there is such a thing, what a typical week looks like for you.
Yeah, it certainly varies for sure. I think any talent partner would say the same thing. The way we're set up internally, we've got, a few different teams who do slightly different types of investing. And so it's usually a function of where we've got the most activity at any given point in time. Our DNA was really minority investment. And as we've raised more capital and we've shifted our strategy a bit, we're taking, larger and larger stakes in our companies and writing bigger checks, et cetera. And so the value creation team spends a lot of time with the companies that we have the most where we have the most influence, and where the mandate is most important. But we've got some minority deals, we've got secondaries, we've got special situations, and then we've got majority or buyout. And so right now, I'd say most of my time portfolio facing is with our buyouts team.
Makes sense. Talk about the kinds of things you're doing. Give us just like a typical case study where you're using data, you're using human capital science. Like what's working for you? What's a home run?
Yeah, the data thing is fascinating, of course, as it relates to AI as well. And so, I hired a colleague of mine maybe about 8 months into the role when I got here, and she's fantastic, but we've kept the team just at 2. And we're able to do a lot with just 2 people. Part of that because we have complementary skill sets, but really we've leaned into data and AI. And so, I can give you a sense of a recent project that we just completed, which is one of our investments, which we feel good about and will have a strong exit in the next couple of years, does have the potential to become an outstanding investment. And so we've brought in a new operating partner. We've taken a real hard look at the way the organization is designed and how it's working operationally. And it didn't take much to figure out that the customer services and support organization was not working all that well. It was very bloated, et cetera. And so we took the opportunity to partner with the new operating partner at that business. And we did a lot of different analysis to figure out, well, how do the different roles within the customer success organization align to the right activities to support the customer journey? And first answer to that was we don't know. And so, which was largely expected. And so then our job became, well, here's the answer to that question. By the way, it's a D or a D plus, and we want to make it an A. And so we did that in a few different ways. We sat down and sort of interviewed the leaders to understand how the work was getting done. We looked cross-functionally at the heads of product and go-to-market leaders to understand what was working well and what wasn't working well. And actually, one of the things that we did, which I thought was pretty cool, is we looked at the actual email traffic and the level of consistency of communication between different members of the customer success team, and we could figure out where were the hubs of activity. In other words, who was being queried most often, who wasn't, when were people on desk, when were people not on desk. And so basically we took 3 days with the help of AI. We analyzed all of that information, and we were able to go back to the deal lead and to the operating partner and CEO and say, hey, these are the no regret changes I think we can make. We can probably decrease the headcount by maybe 40 or 50%. We can use AI in this way. And I think those changes will take something like, 3 to 4 weeks. So that's one example.
That example is fascinating because it's almost like you did your own homegrown organizational network analysis, the two of you and AI, basically.
That's exactly right.
Can we double click in that?
Which by the way, has something like, $2 million worth of savings.
Right. Yeah, believe me, I'm going to double and maybe triple click into this example. I want to know, like, when you say we used AI on that, not like a recipe or step by step, but I'm curious, like, how, just at the next level of detail. And then I want to talk about real savings, because the whole point of this is, right, like 2 people and AI, you're driving cost out of this. This story writes itself, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's right. Let's just say that the call with the deal lead on this one was quite positive. That we needed $2 million. He said, "What about 6?" I don't know.
Classic.
Just
So what's the next click into how did you guys do that with AI? What does that mean?
Well, we've encouraged our teams to experiment as much as possible with AI, and particularly Claude and Claude Code. And so we do have a number of licenses now for Claude Code, and it's a matter of teaching certain skills, by project. And that's exactly what we did is, we basically gave Claude the goal. Yeah. And we said, here are the set of inputs that we have. What additional inputs would you need to be able to produce this type of analysis? We had also done a somewhat similar exercise on calendar organization and scraping internally, which we had done maybe 6 months ago, because this is a whole separate topic, but just like our portfolio companies, Lead Edge Capital needs to also mature in terms of its ability to operate at scale. And so we had an observation that the senior partners were spending their time in a somewhat random fashion. And we said, okay, well, let's just do some calendar analysis and figure out where the opportunity might be to mainstream. Where's the time going? How much time are you spending on the highest priority activities, et cetera? So we had one rep, actually, that we did internally. And then we apply all of that, thinking and those learnings to this portfolio company using Claude. And it was kind of magic. And you should see some of the reporting that came out of it. But it's actually, you can look, it almost looks like a 3-dimensional, ball of string, where you've got different nodes that represent managers and individual reports. And then it's got different lines that connect these different nodes. And the density of the line represents the frequency with which those communications are happening.
Amazing. And is that just with straight up Claude, or I know there are different kind of add-ons and
Claude, Claude Code is where we get it.
Yeah, very cool. And $2 million of savings. I mean,
Who doesn't want that? And then, and the idea is that everyone's talking about how do we apply and incorporate AI to all of our companies. And certainly there's the operational question and the change management around it, but it's also like, well, where are we going to fund AI? How are we going to fund it? And so this is a perfect example where, hey, we could just put that right back into, R&D, not to mention, dropping to the bottom line, getting rid of some costs. So, and I think that's just the tip of the iceberg, honestly. And we shared that in our investment committee, and there were a lot of raised eyebrows, wide eyes, and
I bet. Okay. So, I mean, the whole world is talking about AI, and you're no exception. What about non-AI related things you're working on in the portfolio with people and talent and leadership? What else are you doing that doesn't involve AI?
I do a lot of work with our CEOs because everything comes back to the CEO, right? At the end of the day. And, as I mentioned, we sort of invest in different types of businesses at different stages. And, so we've got founders who are now acting as, CEOs in a more professional organization. We've got first-time CEOs or step-up candidates who may have been in a different function. And then we've got professional CEOs who may have done a similar cycle, multiple times. And so different CEOs are going to have different demonstrated capabilities around managing at scale. And usually a CEO will have some pieces, but no CEO has all the pieces. And so part of the work that I do and that I do with the deal teams is understanding, how are the CEOs actually running their businesses? Meaning, we feel like there's a clear understanding of where the business wants to go, what the strategy is to achieve those outcomes, and then the design of the leadership team to generate those outcomes and propagate the operations to produce those outcomes through the organization. And it's not an easy thing to do. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. And so what we try to do is provide best practices, but also treat each individual engagement as an individual engagement, because one size does not fit all. And so, I think one of the fun things about this job for me is applying, a lot of the principles around management that I've learned throughout my career, including a very systematic way of diagnosing problems and producing better outcomes, and imparting that on our CEOs so that they've got a mechanism to look at, okay, well, what's working versus not, and how do I get to the root cause, which usually comes down to either the wrong person, the wrong role, or a broken process. And so if you help our CEOs start to adopt that kind of a mentality and you watch them, take that and run with it, a lot of times that solves a lot of the problems. And then there's very simply, well, how are you running the executive leadership team? How is that going? And we'll do 360s, we'll do coaching. And, look, part of our job is to assess, in real time, how is a CEO doing? What does he or she need? How can we support? And do we feel like this is a probabilistic good outcome or not?
You talked about you can have kind of 3 different types of CEOs. How do you decide which archetype is best for which portfolio company? Because I would imagine, right, don't you almost always get a deal team that's like, I want someone who's been there, done that before, but that's not always feasible? Or do you not face that from them?
Well, we do face that from them. I think we've been somewhat successful in, backing the team off of that as a one size fits all solution, because sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. And it all depends on what the company in its current state and where the company is going. Now, a lot of times we inherit a CEO or a founder. And so the name of the game there is to understand, well, when we're underwriting the deal, we also have to underwrite the CEO, and we have to understand what we think we're, getting into. And usually it's always yes, no, maybe, right? And so the no's are in some ways, good, because then we have an understanding of how to transition out and make it a good outcome for us and for the, current CEO. The yes is great, but the yes always requires work. And so knowing, what those gaps are before we're going, it's like, look, like we really feel like this CEO has what it takes intrinsically. They've got the operational chops. They've got the earned trust of the team. And so we think that they can take this company to the next level, at least for the next, call it 2 to 4 years. And so then we have to figure out how to invest in that. And then on the maybes, we have to be very intentional in the first 90 days to understand what's the actual picture of the CEO, and are they capable of meeting the KPIs and metrics that we've set out. And more importantly than just the numbers is the trajectory. And so, we talk a lot about what makes a good CEO, and this is always a common topic whenever you get together with other talent partners, like what makes a good CEO. And yes, you have to have a certain amount of aptitude for the business and for managing, but we find that conscientiousness and curiosity and open-mindedness are three of the qualities that will determine success or failure among our CEOs.
Yeah. And how do you measure that in someone? Conscientiousness, curiosity, openness. What's your go-to?
Well, it's pattern recognition. And, I think you have to take each of those things and get signaling around each of those different dimensions, separately. And so, conscientiousness isn't that difficult to understand and to observe. It's more like, okay, what is their level of reliability, and how do their teams consider the engagement? Is it consistent? Is it erratic? Are they thoughtful? Do they do what they say they're going to do? And so that's just sort of behavioral observation and pattern recognition. In terms of open-mindedness, that's a big one. And so, there are always the cases where, when you're going through a deal and a deal cycle, the CEO, will profess to be extremely open. And then you do the deal and you find out, well, it's actually something different. And so you never quite know on that. Look, we do a lot of diligence on our executives. And so we try to talk to as many people as we can. We usually have some idea. But very often we'll run assessments. We will provide coaching. We will, one of the other tells is the board meetings are actually very, very telling. Right. And so, usually I don't think we've ever had an investment where the first board meeting people walk away and are like, man, we nailed that one. They're usually kind of messy and, tends to be a laundry list and like an 85-page deck, and you're not exactly sure what you're talking about or what are the takeaways, et cetera. And so that's a perfect opportunity for us to apply best practices, but also provide some real feedback. And it's also an indicator, for how the CEO is running the business. And so tracking progress over time, especially in board meetings and how they're showing up with our deal leads, that's a big indicator on whether they're listening and whether they can, affect change within themselves.
Something strikes me as you're saying that everything you've described takes time, right? Like you have to get to the first board meeting, you have to observe the behavior. And I'm curious, you mentioned you often use assessments. I'm curious if you're doing something like a Hogan, like a lot of the industry is, like conscientiousness and openness to experience. We can get that in 45 minutes in a Hogan. Are you guys doing that rather than waiting for the behavior to show up?
We do. We use the Hogan religiously. I'm a big fan of the Hogan, but it's not foolproof. And so usually what it does is it gives us a compass, but it's not always deterministic. And sometimes we find that you need both. You need the psychometric data, and then you need patterns of behavior. And the combination of those two things is what builds enough confidence to make decisions on, whether we're going to keep somebody in the seat and or if we're going to remove them. And if we keep them in the seat, what kind of development we're going to provide.
Yeah, that makes sense. By the way, we would say the same thing, right? Like behavior trumps personality all day, every day. It's just the matter of how do you capture behavioral examples as quickly as possible so that you're not having to wait an entire quarter to figure it out or whatever.
Well, it's actually a good point because, I imagine other talent partners say this, and I know they do because I've had these conversations. A lot of the job, especially, in the sort of the first year or two, is, building trust and building relationships, but also educating not just your companies on what good looks like from a talent perspective, but also your deal teams and your deal leads and the partners, because these are very intelligent, but also financially oriented creatures, and which can be very different than, knowing what and how to tackle, people challenges. And the fact is that many of these deal leads have been quite successful, but have never actually run, companies before. And so they've got a relatively steep, learning curve on these things too. And so the reason I bring that up is because you want as many points of triangulation, as you can get to get the pattern recognition to be powerful soon. Right. And so when you've got people on the ground, you've got the deal team, you've got the value creation team, you've got operating partners. Like if you got all eyes, on similar challenges and similar problems, it tends to accelerate, the time that we're to take, in that where your conclusions that you can actually act on.
And don't you feel like as the talent ND, as the human capital person, sometimes it's your job to ask questions to pull those behavioral observations out of the deal team, out of the operating partner in a way that maybe Like I think of it like you're almost a translator because they know what they're seeing, but they maybe don't know how to articulate it to you or to translate it into competency gaps. And you kind of do that translation, I would imagine, to say, you're describing this, that's not bad teamwork, that's actually bad organizational skills. And that, therefore, here's the intervention we're going to do with this executive.
I mean, I think that's 1,000% true. Look, the art of asking questions is sort of like it should be like bullet two on the job description for any talent partner. But that's what I'm describing is that you have to create a common understanding, but also a common language around these things. Especially things like the Hogan has helped a lot. Now, we had all of our deal teams and all of our partners take the Hogan, and they've really adopted it. And so now that's a language where we can use to be a bit more fluent and say, here's where I think is showing up. Oh, yeah, that's right. This person is a 95 on hedonism and I'm a 0 on hedonism. No wonder it's hard for us to have a conversation. You know what I mean? Or this person is very, very low on dutiful. And guess what? There's some stubbornness when you speak to this person every single week. Oh, yeah, that's right. That makes sense. So you ever want to change your tack, right? And so having that as a common language has been a huge help.
And are you doing anything? You talked about the first board meeting is never great because you're learning as they're doing it. Are you doing anything in advance of that? I know some of our clients are working with us to do kind of like a project kickoff of the deal teams, Hogan, the management team, Hogan, and helping, and even just like building a RACI of setting out the expectations around board meetings, hiring. Are you doing work even before that first board meeting?
Yeah, we are. We are. I mean, I think it's still evolving, to be candid, but we're much more intentional and systematic now than we were even a year ago.
Yeah.
And so we will, within the first month of, the investment, the value creation team will sit down with the deal lead, deal team, and the CEO and talk about the value creation plan and the prioritization around those things. And a lot of that will lead into the first board meeting, et cetera. But so it's a little bit of a get to know you, but it's also like, hey, there's a million things we could probably go and do. What is the burning platform for you? Hear them out. Here's where we think the biggest leverage opportunities are based on how we underwrote the deal. And by the way, and I think this is common practice, but we share all of our underwriting materials with, the CEO, once we're up and running. And so very much it's a collaborative effort to say, well, I think here's what the first 90 days, 120 days in first year should look like. And then pretty quickly we get, real brass tacks on value creation. On the talent side, we've developed, a diagnostic that doesn't take any more than 45 minutes to an hour where, we'll send it's a very simple grid, but we'll send that in advance to a CEO. We'll schedule an hour and go through it. And we'll say, look, like any good company with a strong and healthy talent ecosystem will have these different building blocks. And there's like 15 of them. And so it's literally just a sort of a scorecard, which is just to say, well, score this on a scale of 1 to 10. Why do you think that is? How do you know? Go through it. Okay. And then how important are these things and how much lift does it require? And so there'll be the initial meeting with the full value creation team, which now involves not just talent, but also go to market and technology. And then we will break out a new talent, and then we will feed that back to the value creation plan. And there we go for the first, 90 days.
I want to hear about how receptive those management teams are to that intervention from you. Are you feeling like, I imagine it's across the board, like any other change management, but are you seeing people who are like, man, this is fantastic. Thank you. We didn't know what we didn't know. Bring this on. And also people saying like, oh, they're trying to do too much to us. Who are you? I don't need you in the sausage making of my business. Like, how are you experiencing the teams when you try to get into the portfolio companies?
Well, the first thing I would say is LeadEdge really prides itself on a partnership model. And I think to the founders' credits and the managing partners, they've done a really good job in doing that. And so we never go into a room with a posture of this is what you need to do, or lack of transparency about why we're having a conversation. And so I think those foundational principles are very important. I also think there's a window of time where the risk around that is a lot lower. And so being able to say, hey, look, this is common practice and we want to surface, challenges early, I think that seems to resonate with folks. Now, if you wait 6 months and then you do those things, then I think, all of a sudden it'll put people on edge a little bit. So generally speaking, I would say mostly receptive, but again, it's a really good indicator, right? Especially for a CEO. If a CEO is kind of giving us a stiff arm on some of these things, well, listen, like that's not the gig, right? The gig is achieving better together. And so again, like hopefully we'll have some sense of that going into, the deal. But the short answer is no. And if it's a yes, then I think there are broader questions to ask.
Yeah. 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 You talked about it's important to get in early and do that because it becomes awkward if it's later. Do you see a sweet spot in the life of the hold or even pre-hold in diligence of when certain human capital things should happen? Or do you see, because I know some people say, oh, I only touch them in the first year and then I leave them and I go on to the next one. But others say, nope, new issues come up 2 years in, 3 years in. I'm just curious your approach to it.
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, the first thing is getting a leadership team right. If you don't get the leadership team right, then everything else is sort of moot, honestly. And so it starts with the CEO, but then you have to sort of look across the different leaders and say who's capable, who needs development, are the folks that we need to bring in on top of, some of the more, junior executives. And that is priority number one.
Priority number one happens in 90 days, a
Oh,
year.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would say, look, we have to have a view on the quality of the management team within the first 90 days.
Okay.
100%. 100%. And literally the CEO will help us to do that. And you're really pretty candid. It's like, hey, look, because they have views. The CEOs have views and opinions on folks. And so all we're doing is asking them to share those to help. Sometimes it's a matter of sitting down and making sure we have that view and doing some independent triangulation. But I think that's got to be in the first 90 days for sure. And so then that will kick off any number of work streams around either leveling folks up or, starting to look for replacements, executive searches, et cetera. So I'd say that's kind of priority number one. I think and then from that flows leadership effectiveness. And so maybe you've already got, a company that has a more mature executive team and there aren't a lot of, replacements that are required. And so then, just spend some time looking at, well, how are decisions getting made? Are we being systematic in what we're measuring, week over week, month after month? And, we'll also run an employee survey or ask for the employee survey data from their most recent, version of that so we can see what the company is thinking, sort of on the ground. We put those two pieces together. So that's the first 90 days, which is how is leadership working? Do we have the right people in place? Do we feel like they understand what the strategy is? And are they able to execute and drive the organization, right? So that's first 90 days. Usually what happens is once we start to develop a picture of that, then it comes down to, well, are the different departments scoped and sized correctly? And are they resourced correctly? And are they working together in a productive way? So that's where the org design work, starts to happen, which is to say, okay, let's go a level down. And how are your senior managers? How are they doing? How long have they been here? What's their track record? Show me the performance of their people. Are you guys doing 9-box? And then what happens is you get this sort of trifecta of, the capability of middle managers, and you've got performance management, and then you've got compensation. And so usually what happens is you try to understand, how is that three-legged stool working? Because without one of those things, the others don't quite work. And that I would say is a longer, sort of proposition. So I think, that's anywhere from, sometimes it starts on day one, but usually it's, maybe a quarter or two in, you really start tackling that. And that can last for a year and a half.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then anything right before sale, are you doing anything like, let's kind of polish everyone up on how to sit at the table and give a management presentation, or shoot, we better make a change now because we want to go to market 18 months from now? Are you doing anything like that toward the end of?
A little bit, although some of it might be reactive. It depends on the nature of the deal, honestly. If you're playing for an IPO, then you have some sense of what you need, when you need to get ready, and how that's going to go. But sometimes the market dictates different types of deals, and if it's a strategic deal, you may not have time to do, anything differently, and so that may or may impact the sale price, or may or may not impact the sale price. But the short answer is, hopefully, that's not the forcing function to get the company operating well and to have the right executives in place. So I'd say we try to front load that wherever we can.
Just a couple more questions. I mean, I could pod forever with you, but one thought is Are you getting involved when they are, or maybe this isn't part of your company strategies, but as they're doing their own add-ons, are you going into that and like diligencing the next group coming in and repeating this cycle with every add-on that comes in, or do you stay at that platform level?
Great question. I mean, you have to look at it every single time. It also depends on the size of the company that's merging. I mean, if it's small tuck-in, obviously the implications are not as high, but we just had a company triple overnight in size and ARR and employee count. And so, man, I mean,
You were on that one.
yeah, yeah, I mean, you have to look. I don't think we did enough. Frankly, I don't think we did enough because you've already got this momentum built and people are going and there's excitement around the merger. But that's a big change management challenge, and it's also a like, who are we getting? And how is that going to change the dynamic? I think we did some of that well. I think we had some lessons learned to be honest. And so I think we're building our toolkit around that. And, we've got some others coming up. So I think we'll probably throw even, more resourcing against it.
Yeah, we have a relatively new client that I'm loving their model. They're calling us, well, of course, I would love it. They're calling us for every one of those add-ons. Like, here's a kind of mom and pop, diligence the two guys at this for me. Here's another one we're tucking in. It's one person, do an assessment light of them. And it's really showing how seriously they're taking this and as they do these add-ons, and then thinking about the change management of it, like you mentioned. It's not as simple as, okay, they're fine and their business is fine, but culturally, how do you integrate these? Do you integrate them?
Yeah, and it's never gonna be perfect. Like, definitionally, people are gonna have different backgrounds, different cultures. The companies may occupy different spaces. I think it comes down to how proactive or reactive you have to be, and of course you always want to be in the first bucket, and that's where I think the adoption of things like the Hogan and like psychometrics, but also there's a human side to this too. There's a very human side to this too, which is building the relationships. And you'd be surprised. I mean, I think people, I know this is what you do every day, but people, with the right approach, which certainly is an art and a science, people tend to open up. People tend to really, and there are things that they want to say, and sometimes they're being heard for the first time.
Mm-hmm. And this is why, kind of cycling back to, like, you started talking about AI, it's a great helping tool, but it's that tells me we're never going to be fully automatron AI driven, right? Like, humans want to be heard by other humans. And
that's right. Yeah.
You have to manage.
That's right. And so look, my personal philosophy is you can't influence people unless they feel seen or heard. And that takes time, and it's not the same approach for everybody. And that's honestly part of what I try to impart internally on our teams, because as you know, numbers are numbers, people are people, and there's a lot in between.
You have done a lot in the 3 years you've been in this role, and it's been fun to watch these 3 years with you where you were building these processes, and yet there's always more, right? What's the thing that you wish, like if you had a magic wand, you'd like to do more of? You'd like to open the door of doing this kind of human capital work if, resources on your team were no object or whatever. Is there some nut that you haven't yet cracked?
Actually, we are spending more, and I think this is actually on the roadmap for us, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to create talent communities among our portfolio companies. And actually, just this morning, I was talking to one of our managing partners about, running a pilot with, 6 to 8 of our CEOs for 3 to 6 months and thinking about what that might look like. And, we certainly get asked about it, but we wanted to make sure that we were in a place to do it in an excellent way.
Yeah.
And so I think we're going to start with CEOs, but then of course, I mean, to some degrees we've done this, but I think curating a community, a lead edge community for our executives, is something that we want to invest more and more in.
Nice. Very cool. I want to thank you for doing this. And a part of that is there are a lot of companies out there looking at investors. Why would I choose Lead Edge Capital? What's the differentiator for you all? And
look, I think it's a special place. I'm a little bit biased, but I think it's a pretty special place. I think that the values of the firm are excellent. I think the work ethic and the culture around sort of being able to get things done better and more quickly than anybody else might but also in a way that, again, I highlighted partnership before. Like, I think that's actually true. If you talk to our CEOs, I think their testimonials in different places, I think what you would hear is, man, these guys know what they're doing, and they've opened markets for us. They've given us, guidance. They've got a massive network of, professionals and CEOs and operators. And so I think we bring real discipline on investment, certainly why we're getting into, business with these companies in the first place, but also providing structure, providing resourcing, providing guidance, and doing it in a way where, relationships come first. So, I think that's what we strive to achieve. And a lot of that is the work that we do in talent and value creation. And, over the past 3 years, building, that flywheel between our companies and value creation and our deal teams and our LP network is what makes it powerful.
Amazing. Well, that seems like a great place to stop the conversation. So thank you for joining us, Adam Stein. Really appreciate the conversation today.
You too, Sandy. This was fun. Anytime.